So, you might notice that we not only have a beer with Baron, we have a beard with Baron today, and that's because today, with Robert K. Elder, a fellow Oak Parker, we have the author of a recent book on Papa Hemingway, Ernest Hemingway, who's noted for being not only a Nobel Prize and a Pulitzer Prize winner, but one of the most follically impressive writers of the 20th century. And so, Robert K. Elder, author of Hidden Hemingway,
correct,
which we'll talk about a little bit, but that's just the tip of the iceberg with you. So what I'm intrigued about is that your company is called Odd Hours Media, and which is a hint at kind of your approach.
Yes, I had been sort of a long-time insomniac, and in fact I got home this morning at 3. Yeah, work happens everywhere and under any conditions, but Odd Hours Media is my sort of excuse to be curious and go wherever that takes me. So
okay, so it's an enabler for your.
It is.
And so talk about Hidden Hemingway a little bit, because I've loved going through that.
Oh, great, thanks.
It's the quintessential coffee table book. You can pick it up anywhere.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, why hidden? Tell us about what was so hidden about this Hemingway.
Well, many of the things hadn't been seen. So the idea was tell Hemingway's life story through objects. So I had been the editor-in-chief for a series of newspapers, the Pioneer Press, and the Oak Leaves was one of them. And a few years ago, around the anniversary for the start of World War I, somebody said, "Hey, didn't Hemingway write for the Oak Leaves?" And I said, "Hey, aren't we a newspaper? Shouldn't we know?"
Sure.
So I looked into it, and in fact, he had not written for the Oak Leaves. He had delivered the Oak Leaves. And then when he was wounded in World War I, a letter home was published in the Oak Leaves.
Right.
So I went through all these amazing archives. There are 4 archives in Oak Park with Hemingway-related material and letters. And I went to John Barry, who is the head of the Ernest Hemingway Foundation in Oak Park, and I said, "Why isn't this a book?" And 3 years later, here we are.
So that's like when someone says there should be a committee for this. They're the chair of that committee.
Yes.
So that's how your book ideas come.
Yeah. So yeah, it was curiosity plus civic pride.
Right. Now he's, if not the most written about, one of the most written about authors of all time. Part of it is because he left such a trail. This guy was a pack rat.
Yes. I think pack rat, or less polite would be hoarder.
Oh.
But when I started the book, Sandra Spanier, who is the head of the Ernest Hemingway Letters Project, she said, he kept not only every piece of paper that he wrote on, he kept every piece of paper he ever touched. And I thought that was hyperbolic until I went through all the material.
So do you have any insight as to why? Why was he so consumed with toting this stuff around the globe?
Part of it was compulsion, but he was as meticulous about documenting the number of words he wrote every morning. So that was just part of his personality, the sort of self-documenting. So you're right, we have more books about him than any other author, like including Shakespeare at this point.
What do you like most about Ernie?
The person or the...
I'd say the total Ernie. So
Ernie.
Whatever that means.
He's a hard guy to live with because he was not a wonderful human being. He was a sort of a glorious scoundrel, and a bundle of contradictions. But at times he was very sort of honest about that. But he would have been somebody very tough to live with.
Was it daunting for you knowing that so much had been written about him? I mean, obviously you found, what's great is that you found these new elements, and some were left on the cutting room floor. Yeah,
well, the only things that were left on the floor were objects or pieces of paper or letters that we thought you couldn't tell a story around. So there's a lot more in the archives, but we found a letter or a note that suggests he had an affair with his sister-in-law. We found a poem that he wrote to this classmate who may have been a girlfriend, which kind of rewrites his romantic history, because most people who went to high school with him said, oh, he was not interested in girls, or he was more interested in fishing and hunting. So yes, it was daunting, but we knew what we had.
Let's go back to more to you and your 40 plus years on this planet, and you've had a lot of different roles: journalist, author, photographer. You encapsulated in some very colorful way. What's the
Everything is a side hustle.
side hustle? So what's your next side hustle? What's on the horizon?
Well, there's a book coming out in spring of 2018. I think it's called My Life as a Mixtape.
Yeah, it's still unsure.
Yeah. I pitched it. I sold it as My Life Soundtrack, but it's basically how to tell your life story through your music collection. And so it's prompts like, what artist or what song can't you listen to anymore because of a past relationship?
Yes.
So it's an excuse to sort of tell story.
Do you tell your story in this?
No, I don't. No, it's purely a prompt journal.
Oh, it's a prompt.
So it's a gift. It's a gift book, basically.
Gotcha. So, well, maybe I'll get it for you, and I'll prompt you.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
That's for another episode. So, so in your travels, you've done a lot of. I mean, you've done books that the best movie you've never seen.
Yeah. So I have 3 film books. I used to be a film critic for the Chicago Tribune, so that's where my love of film comes from. It's my first love, my career trajectory is really just following epiphanies. So epiphany moments, and I love the film books because I talk to 35 directors about the movie-going experience that made them a movie director.
Excellent. Those turning points. So, what is that drew you to this whole racket in the first place of storytelling?
Journalism and storytelling in general. But I always say journalism is the greatest job in the world because you're paid to be curious, and that's it. I get to go out and discover new things and create new things all the time. That's great. You never stagnate. You're always curious.
So, do you have some bucket list items that you can articulate right now, or do they just come along as you go?
Books. So, My Life Soundtrack, or My Life as a Mixtape, will be book number 8, and then books number 9 and 10, I think, will be an edition of Moby Dick for Melville's 200th anniversary, illustrated by an artist named Gilbert Wilson. And it's a little premature because all of the details aren't worked out yet, but I'm confident enough that this will happen.
So it's a biography of Melville?
No. It's really about Gilbert Wilson, who is this amazing artist. He was a Hoosier. He was raised in Terre Haute, Indiana, and he had this amazing career, but sort of died unknown and penniless in 1991. So it's a celebration of his illustrations of Moby Dick. And while I was doing this, I found an amazing biography by a guy named Edward K. Spann that had never been published about Gilbert Wilson. So I will try to have them published in tandem.
One of the things that I know we were talking about earlier was your connection to Oak Park.
Yeah.
And so talk about what drew you to Oak Park and what keeps you here.
Sure, I just love Oak Park. I love any sort of walkable city. My wife and I, she was pregnant with our twins when we moved out here. We just love not only the schools, but also, little things like, shops like this and, One-Stop Comics and, is it Pirates? Pirates, the stationery store.
Yeah, since the 1800s.
Yeah. So we love sort of the legacy and the culture and things like Pleasant Home. Like, where else do you have a community that will go and sit on a porch to watch silent movies? Right. So such a sense of history here and cultural livelihood. So we love it. We take our twins everywhere.
So you're clearly a researching nerd. You love digging in your archives. So
I would say detail-oriented. Yes.
Detail-oriented. Okay.
Yes.
So when did that first show up in your life?
So when I was in college, I was a student archivist for Ken Kesey. And again, he wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I met him when I was a junior in high school, and he sort of encouraged me to go to Eugene, Oregon, to the University of Oregon. So I worked with their archives, and it has forever made me an archives geek.
So Ken Kesey, you were part of his kind of bloodline literarily?
Not necessarily. I will say that he was a huge influence.
Yeah. So we ran out of time, but I know that means more time for you to work on your next projects.
Yeah, I'm doing it under the bar, actually, as we talk.
There's a lot of scrawling down there. Thanks for taking the time. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing what comes out next out of the Odds Hour Media franchise.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Robert.